Good morning, everyone. Good afternoon, I suppose. And it's wonderful to be able to be with you. It's a wonder to be able to be with you wherever you are, whether you're out in public looking on your phone, whether you're sitting at home in front of your computer, howsoever it is that we can reach one another. It is truly a marvel that we can still experience our Christian walk even though we are at different places, different times, even different dates in our lives. And so it is joy, wherever you are and however I reach you, to have this day to spend with you. I do apologize to everyone. I just had an appointment with my dentist this morning, and so my jaw's still just a little bit sore, so this one might be a little bit shorter than what I normally do. But we'll dive right into the good stuff right now. I'd like to read first a passage from Deuteronomy chapter 30, verses 15 through 20. Behold, I have set before you today life and prosperity, death and adversity. If you obey the commandments of the Lord your God that I am commanding you today, by loving the Lord your God, walking in his ways, and observing his commandments, decrees, and ordinances, then you shall live and become numerous, and the Lord your God will bless you in the land that you are entering to possess. But if your heart turns away, and you do not hear, but are led astray to bow down to other gods and serve them, I declare to you today that you shall perish. You shall not live long in the land that you are crossing the Jordan to enter and possess. I call heaven and earth to witness against you today, that I have set before you life and death, blessings and curses. Choose life, so that you and your descendants may live. Loving the Lord your God, obeying him, and holding fast to him. For that means life to you and length of days, so that you may live in the land that the Lord swore to give to your ancestors, to Abraham, to Isaac, and to Jacob. I'd like to offer up a special reading that will be unique to us here on YouTube, because in general, we don't utilize the Apocrypha during our church services on Sundays. And yet, one of the suggested readings for this past Sunday came from the book of Sirach, which is found in the Apocrypha. And so I would like to read for you Sirach chapter 15, verses 15 through 20. If you choose, you can keep the commandments, and to act faithfully is a matter of your own choice. He has placed before you fire and water. Stretch out your hand for whichever you choose. Before each person are life and death, and whichever one chooses will be given. For great is the wisdom of the Lord. He is mighty in power and sees everything. His eyes are on those who fear him, and he knows every human action. He has not commanded anyone to be wicked, and has not given anyone permission to sin. We'll turn next to a psalm reading for this week, and that will be Psalm number 119, verses 1 through 8. Happy are those whose way is blameless, who walk in the law of the Lord. Happy are those who keep his decrees, who seek him with their whole heart, who also do no wrong, but walk in his ways. You have commanded your precepts to be kept diligently. Oh, that my ways may be steadfast in keeping your statutes. Then I shall not be put to shame, having my eyes fixed on all your commandments. I will praise you with an upright heart when I learn your righteous ordinances. I will observe your statutes. Do not utterly forsake me. Next for this week, we will turn to Paul's first letter to the Corinthians, chapter 3, the first 9 verses. And so, brothers and sisters, I could not speak to you as spiritual people, but rather as people of the flesh, as infants in Christ. I fed you with milk, not solid food, for you were not ready for solid food. Even now you are still not ready, for you are still of the flesh. For as long as there is jealousy and quarreling among you, are you not of the flesh, and behaving according to human inclinations? For when one says, I belong to Paul, and another, I belong to Apollos, are you not merely human? What then is Apollos? What is Paul? Servants, through whom you came to believe, as the Lord assigned to each. I planted, Apollos watered, but God gave the growth. So neither the one who plants nor the one who waters is anything, but only God who gives the growth. The one who plants and the one who waters have a common purpose, and each will receive wages according to the labor of each. For we are God's servants, working together. You are God's field, God's building. And our final reading for this week, our gospel reading, will come from Matthew's Gospel, the 5th chapter, verses 21 through 37. You have heard that it was said to those of ancient times, You shall not murder, and whoever murders shall be liable to judgment. But I say to you that if you are angry with a brother or sister, you will be liable to judgment. And if you insult a brother or sister, you will be liable to the council. And if you say, You fool, you will be liable to the hell of fire. So when you are offering your gift at the altar, if you remember that your brother or sister has something against you, leave your gift there before the altar and go. First be reconciled to your brother or sister, and then come and offer your gift. Come to terms quickly with your accuser while you are on your way to court with him, or your accuser may hand you over to the judge, and the judge to the guard, and you will be thrown into prison. Truly I tell you, you will never get out until you have paid the last penny. You have heard that it was said, You shall not commit adultery. But I say to you that everyone who looks at a woman with lust has already committed adultery with her in his heart. If your right eye causes you to sin, tear it out and throw it away. It is better for you to lose one of your members than for your whole body to be thrown into hell. And if your right hand causes you to sin, cut it off and throw it away. It is better for you to lose one of your members than for your whole body to go into hell. It was also said, Whoever divorces his wife, let him give her a certificate of divorce. But I say to you, that anyone who divorces his wife, except on the ground of unchastity, causes her to commit adultery, and whoever marries a divorced woman commits adultery. Again, you have heard that it was said to those of ancient times, You shall not swear falsely, but carry out the vows you have made to the Lord. But I say to you, do not swear at all, either by heaven, for it is the throne of God, or by the earth, for it is his footstool, or by Jerusalem, for it is the city of the great King. And do not swear by your head, for you cannot make one hair white or black. Yet let your word be yes, yes, or no, no. Anything more than this comes from the evil one. Thus ends the reading of God's Word. I'd like to speak to you guys today about what Paul said to the Corinthians. And I would like to speak to you about this because this passage hits very close to my heart. And the reason for that is, when I was younger, I always felt, vaguely, like the church was very patronizing. And I felt that way because it seemed to me that when you went to church, you listened to someone who told you what to believe. And there was no question. You couldn't move beyond what the pastor had prescribed. You could not go outside of the bounds that this pastor had laid down. It seemed to me that you weren't allowed to think. It seemed to me the entire purpose of the Sunday morning church service was to tell people, you are not intelligent enough to figure it out on your own. You are too irresponsible to do it right. And so, let us tell you who you should be, how you should be. And that always bothered me. It bothered me because I have an independent streak. In fact, before I became a pastor, I had to take a psychological evaluation. And one of their findings, which wasn't really that much of a finding, I could have told you, anyone who knew me could have told you, was that autonomy was very important to me. And as I went through my process of candidacy, there was a group of people who would ultimately have to sign off on whether or not I could move forward as a candidate for ministry. And this group of people, the first time that I applied for candidacy, denied me because of my desire for autonomy. Because they had read those words in the report of the psychologist, and they thought, because of that, I would not listen to the words of my district superintendent, of my bishop, of all of those people who have any kind of authority within the church. The worry was that I would go rogue. And so they decided that I needed a little bit more maturity, that I needed a little bit more time to recognize the fact that I was under the auspices of other people. That it wasn't just me versus the world, that it wasn't just me and whatever church I would be in versus the world, but that I was a part of a team and that I needed to learn how to be a team player. Now, if I'm being completely honest, all that taught me was the way to give a proper answer to a selection committee. I still am highly motivated by autonomy, and I value my autonomy greatly. I value my independence, and I am not prepared in any circumstance to be pandered to be condescended to be patronized. Now I read this letter from Paul, and Paul reaches out to the believers in Corinth, those who have accepted Jesus Christ, those who have professed Jesus as their Lord and Savior. And Paul says to the believers at Corinth, when I came to you, I couldn't even give you a real message. We weren't able to dive into the meat of the issue. I wasn't able to teach you the deepest of the theological truths. I had to treat you all like you were children. And I am mature enough to admit that every time I read that passage, I cringe on behalf of the Corinthians. I don't know any of the people who lived in Corinth at that time. I don't know any people who live in the Corinthian area right now. And yet, I have to assume that there must be someone who is like me. Somebody who does not want to be patronized, somebody who doesn't want to be talked down to, somebody who would be actively offended because they knew that Paul was trying to simplify the message for them. That Paul was trying to distill it down into its barest minimum. And so my heart goes out to the Corinthians. Paul may have been entirely correct. Perhaps every single one of the people in Corinth was ill prepared to hear the depths of God's love. Perhaps the people of Corinth were not quite spiritually mature enough to hear just how much they should love based on how much love had been shown to them. And yet for Paul to turn around and to write this letter to the Corinthians and say, "You weren't ready for meat, so I fed you with milk," it comes across as way too high and mighty for my tastes. Now, I understand that I know more things than some people, and I also understand that there are many, many people out in the world who know much, much more than I do. And yet, if they can't talk to me like a human being, and if I can't talk to others who don't know what I do like a human being, I feel like we have failed one another. See, Paul, one of his biggest points in ministry is that we all need to be in community with one another, that we all need to work alongside one another, that we all need to elevate one another. It's not a matter of placing ourselves on a pedestal so that we can look down on everyone else. It's raising everyone else up so that we may stand shoulder to shoulder, in order that we might do the same work and in order that we might truly worship the same God. And yet in this instance, Paul seems content to say, "I am higher than you. I am up here. My knowledge is up here. You cannot attain it. You couldn't attain it when I was with you, and even now, after you've had the time, after you have had my instruction, you have still not risen. You are still beneath me." And so Paul uses that literary device and says, "You were not ready for milk." Now, those of you who know me probably know that I have a child on the way. She will be my first child, and when she comes, I give great glory to God that I have my wife along with me. Because steak and potatoes is one of my favorite meals. It's one of my defaults. It's one of the things that I will make for myself on those nights where I'm sitting at home alone while my wife's at work. Now, I am not so self-absorbed, I am not so ignorant of biology that I believe that my infant daughter will be able to eat steak and potatoes right along with me. I know that for a time she will have to have special foods. I know that for a time her body will not be able to handle such a thing. The difference between my infant daughter and the people at Corinth is that they were adults. They have the capacity to understand. Now, Paul said, in Paul's knowledge, they weren't prepared. They were spiritually akin to what my daughter will be after she's born. They were ill prepared for the depth, for the substance that Paul could have offered. Now, Paul said that he also did not give them the great, grand, and glorious words of wisdom because he didn't want anyone to think that Paul, in his knowledge, Paul with his education, Paul with his eloquence, was creating this. It had come from elsewhere. And so Paul wanted to make it accessible to them. And so Paul did not use the grand and flowery words. Paul did not use the beautiful language. Paul offered up to the Corinthian people in simple truths what it was that they needed. Paul didn't want to be exemplified for his skill with words. Paul wanted God to be glorified for God's love. And so, whatever his reason may be, whether it was because the Corinthians were ill-equipped to understand the substance that Paul had to offer, or whether it was because Paul truly wanted to make sure that every single one of them, from the greatest to the least, from the most educated to the most uneducated, could all approach the message, Paul gave them a specific message. Now, when I read the passage that I read for all of you today, all I could focus on was the fact that Paul said they had not been ready and they were still not ready. Now, I had a wonderful religion professor when I was doing my undergrad work, and one of the things he said is that as you move forward in theology, you will discover that there is a mystery that you simply cannot wrap your head around. There is a mystery that you cannot come to terms with. There is a mystery which will not make itself plain to you. And he said it happens to every single person, and you just have to choose which mystery you are going to hang your hat on. There are some words that are going to be unclear to us. There are going to be some concepts that do not resonate with us. There are going to be some things that we read and we cannot begin to countenance how or why that would ever be. That is our mystery. That is the one that we hang our hat on, and that is the one that we have to content ourselves to know that we may never know on this side of heaven. I like what Dr. Gammon said a lot more than I like what Paul said. There is a mystery, and it will be a mystery. Everyone is going to find one. It's not because you are a failure as a theologian. It's not because you are a failure as a follower of whatever religious tradition you are a part of. There is just a mystery because God is so much higher than humanity. Because God's words and because God's thoughts are so much higher than human words or human thoughts. And so we are left to wonder, and we are left to consider that our knowledge is and will continue to be incomplete. Paul simply said, "You are not prepared. You cannot hear it. It is beyond your comprehension. It is beyond your ability to process." Different words, pretty much the same message. And so I think about that. We hold a Bible study in here at the church on Tuesday mornings. And one of the things that I have made sure that we can do is to explore mystery. There are many, many areas of the Bible that do not make sense to me. The way that people act, the way that God acts, there is much of it that does not make sense to me. It does not fall in line with my way of thinking. And so we make space because we cannot understand it all. We do not have all of the information at hand. We do not understand all of the motivations and all of the thoughts that are at play. And yet, as we come together, we can hear from one another. We can begin to plumb those mysteries that don't make sense to us, that might to somebody else seem entirely apt, entirely accurate, entirely appropriate. And I love that kind of study, where we can begin to bounce those ideas off of one another, and where through our mutual assistance and through our mutual care, through our mutual contribution, we can see growth. We've talked about things that different traditions believe. We've talked about different mysteries. We've talked about things that just simply don't make sense to those of us who gather. And maybe they never will. But that's okay. Because part of what we are called to do is to trust. To trust that though things are mysterious to us, they are not mysterious to God. To trust that though we do not understand, that God does. To trust that though we may not be able to find the path, God knows where it is, and that God will bring us to it. Now, for those like me who have such a strong desire for autonomy, for those like me who have such a pronounced independent streak, that's a hard pill to swallow. To know that I just have to trust in God. To know that it will never be mine on this side of heaven. To know that there will always be mysteries. To know that there will always be things that do not make sense. To know that there will always be questions. That's hard. And so, today, I try and think of myself as being right in line with the Corinthians. There are things that I am not prepared for, and there are things that I will never be prepared for on this side of heaven. Once I get there, if God so chooses, God can make all plain to me, and beneath the tutelage of God, I think all mysteries will be revealed. I think that all questions will be answered. I think that all misconceptions will be banished. But for now, I do have to live in my doubts. I do have to live in my worries. I do have to live in my questions. And I've come to learn, no matter how difficult that may sound, I can do it. It's something that is within me. I am capable. And so I can give God glory even in the midst of not knowing. I can give God glory even in the midst of me having to rely. I can give God glory even in the midst of me being part of a team. Me being part of all of humanity. As we muddle along, as we struggle through, as we slip and as we fall and as we turn away, we all do. As we seek after answers, some we might find, some we will not find. And yet, it's okay. It's okay because we are here for one another. We are here to continue to work one another onward and upward. We are here to continue to explain what we can, to question what we can't, and to make life better for each other. To offer up the benefit of our experience, of our knowledge, of our wisdom. To give insights that might help somebody else to understand just a little bit more. For the mystery to have just the tiniest bit more light shined upon it. We can all do that for one another. And so it is my hope and prayer in this day that today, whatever day that may happen to be for you, that you can find some way today to shine a little bit more light. That you can find some way today to work your way through a mystery. That you can find some way today, even if you have to hang your hat on that mystery and to accept that it is well and truly in God's hands. And those are the best hands for anything to be in. And so today, I hope that each one of us can take the steps that we need to move onward. That we might move a little bit closer to being fed with meat. That we may move a little bit closer to being prepared for the greater substance that is all around us and that awaits us. We will make it there. It has been promised to us. It is destined for us. It awaits us. And so, my brothers and sisters, let us continue to move onward together. Let us continue to operate together. Let us continue to contribute together so that we all may grow, so that we all may be made strong, so that we all may see with new eyes, hear with new ears, understand with a new mind, and love with a new heart. It is within us, it is before us, and now let's make it ours. Thanks to all of you for joining in with me today, for allowing me to share a few words, and for continuing to walk with me, allowing me to continue to know my place amongst our team, to know my place amongst our people, to know my place amongst God's creation. We are all members of it. And so it is a joy to experience all of it, every sight, every sound, with you. Thank you so much. I hope you have a fantastic week. Remember, always and everywhere, you are beloved by God. You are a child of God. And so carry that knowledge, carry that love, and carry all of the promises contained within it, always and everywhere in your life. Thanks be to God. Thank you all. Have a fantastic week.